Welcome back to Something Good in the Kitchen. I hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining me on this episode of Cooking with Thaddeus. A 5-minute short on what type of bread to make. I generally make one of two types of bread, and I'll show you examples of each. One is a more traditional style loaf that I start and cook in the same day, and the other is a more artisan style, and I start the dough at night, and then I cook the bread the next day. Second recipe is really flexible, and you can even wait until you come home from work to cook the loaf of bread. Both recipes are the same and require no kneading. For this recipe, check out my video, Make Time for Fresh Bread. Let me show you this artisan style dough. I mixed up this dough last night after dinner. I let it rise overnight, and the yeast have been working their magic during fermentation and forming complex flavors in the dough. There's also some gluten formation, so the crumb will have more chewy texture. I'm going to form up a loaf and pop this in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit and cook for about 35 to 40 minutes. I'm going to use a spatula to kind of get this dough from sides of the bowl. It's been in here all night, so it's pretty wet. Okay, I'm going to scrape the side of the bowl, get all that dough into one big ball. And so you can form your loaf. Then you can get your hands wet if you need to. And then you can form a nice loaf, a nice tight loaf. Okay, it might be a little sticky. Okay, you need to put a little flour on the dough, you can, but you know, getting your hands wet helps and form a nice tight ball. You form your loaf. Now, if it's too wet and it's not staying in one nice shape, then you might have to add a little bit of flour to it. So add a little flour in there. Get that dough not so wet. Doesn't really need any kneading. You're just forming a nice toe. Put it into the center there. And I just like to tuck it underneath like that. You know, roll it and tuck it underneath. You let it rise or proof again, you can. Sometimes people like to just put it in the vessel they're gonna cook and just cook it up. And under it, if you need a little bit more flour, that's okay. On there, you don't need very much, quarter cup or something like that. But the tighter you make that, wrap it under, the better that will be for your loaf. Okay, let's set in the bowl there. I'm gonna put this right into this cloche. I'm gonna let that rise a little bit. I'm gonna put the top back on, let it sit here for a little bit. Some people like to put it in a oven that's just warming up to 450, so it rises a little bit. And some people like to put it into an oven that's already 450 degrees. Whatever you choose, you know, experiment, see what you like. Okay, this is ready to go. I'm gonna cut 3 slits in the top of this just for some expansion. I'm gonna cut one right there with a serrated knife. I'm gonna cut one on the top, and I'm gonna cut one right here like this on that side, 1/2 inch or so deep, couple 1 to 1.5 centimeters. And then I'm gonna pop this in the oven, turn it up to 450, and cook it for about 35-40 minutes. Let me show you this more traditional style loaf. I mixed this dough up this morning, and I'm gonna let it rise twice. I'm gonna let it double in size, then punch it down, and then I'm gonna form it up into a loaf and let it rise a little bit. And then I'm gonna cook it at the same temperature, 450 degrees, for about 35 to 40 minutes in the cloche. Some people, when they use instant bread yeast, they just do a 10-minute rest, and then they form up their loaf and let it rise once and then cook it. I like the double rise. Experiment with it and see what you like. Here are the two loaves. There's artisan here on the left and the traditional on the right. You will notice some differences in the exterior crust, but let's take a look at the interior. I cut them both in half, and you can look at the inside, the crumb part of this one on the left here, the artisan. The artisan style loaf has larger holes, and the crumb is a bit firmer. And this is a great style for a bruschetta on the grill. You also notice a difference in taste with a more developed and complex flavor. Hey, check out my 5-minute shorts for suggested toppings for this style of bread. There's a classic bruschetta with tomato, a goat cheese with Kalamata olives, and even a cannellini bean hummus. This traditional style loaf has smaller holes and it has a more tender crumb. It's a great bread for sandwiches and grilled cheese or even French toast. Take a look at them side by side, so you get to decide what type of bread you want to make. Okay, one more thing before we go. People often ask, how do you store your bread? Well, in our family, we have a pretty simple system. We take a plate like this. If we only have half the loaf left, we put the cut side down, and then we just take a stainless steel bowl and we just put it right on over top. And that seems to work and keep the bread fresh. There you have it. 2 styles of bread and you get to decide. I hope you enjoyed this 5-minute short. Thanks for joining me and hope to see you next time on Something Good in the Kitchen.